In this discussion, we will be speaking about the interpretation of the Polish forms czyta and czytaj within the Polish Conjugational System. Let's start with the major differences between Russian and Polish. Since the most well-known system for dealing with Russian conjugation is that of Roman Jakobson, the so-called one-stem system. And for many years, linguists have tried to fit the Polish system into a neat explanation along the same lines. But there has been a great difficulty with respect to the forms czyta and czytaj, and we will see why as we go along. Well, starting off with the major differences between the West Slavic, especially Polish, and East Slavic, especially Russian, conjugational systems, we find that in West Slavic we have a very frequent use of the M for the first person singular, which only occurs very rarely in Russian, say. In Polish, for example, czytam and many words like that. In Russian, only jem and a very, very small number of words such as that. Secondly, the first person plural ending in West Slavic and Polish as well ends in a vowel, such as amy in czytamy, or robimy, also ending in I. I would be the ending in question. In Russian, this is just a consonantal ending M, as in czytają, for example. Thirdly, we have the absence of the T ending in the third person in West Slavic compared to the use of a T in Russian, for example. So we have czyta and czytają in Polish, but czytajet and czytajut in Russian. And fourth, we have the use of originally athematic consonantal endings after the verbal suffix I in West Slavic, including Polish, such as czytam, czytasz, czyta, while in Russian we have the use of first conjugation endings after the so-called I suffix, czytaju, czytajesz, czytajet. Okay, that's a difference of conjugation. Now, Jakobson's one-stem conjugation system was created in 1948 specifically for Russian verbal morphology. Several adaptations exist of the Polish conjugational system, attempting to use as much of the 1948 Jakobsonian system as possible. We will analyze several of these and take a look at how they work. In other words, we'll try to answer the question, how have various scholars coped with the differences between Polish and Russian verbal morphology? Now, some of the Russian morphemes are easier to segment than the Polish ones. For example, in Russian, we have a consistent stem czytaj, and then czytaju, czytajesz, czytajet, and so forth. And in the infinitive, we have czytać, which can use the stem czytaj with the deletion of the yot. And in the imperative, we can have czytaj with the use of a zero ending, leaving intact the form czytaj. In other words, the third person singular, czytajet, is only a matter of adding the ote ending to czytaj, and in the imperative, the form czytaj is only a matter of adding a zero to the stem czytaj. When vowels or zero are added to the stem final yot, nothing is deleted, and when a consonant is added in Russian, the yot itself gets deleted, the stem final yot. However, when we come to Polish, we have the identical stem czytaj followed by a zero with two totally different results. In other words, czytaj plus zero can give us czyta, the third person singular, and czytaj plus 0 in the imperative can give us czytaj. Two results from apparently the same underlying sequence. So at first glance, it looks like the very same stem and ending is producing two different results, and this issue must be addressed. Well, let's start with taking a look at how some of the existing treatments have dealt with this. Let's start with Schenker's 1954 system and see what that did. In that system, after the I suffix, a thematic A vowel appears in the present tense, but not the imperative. So the suffix I is then deleted before this new A suffix as follows. You get czytaj plus A, czytaja, and that causes the deletion of I, so you wind up with czyta. However, that doesn't happen in the imperative. This is apparently something of an ad hoc solution, the creation of an element such as A that has no real justification, just in order to produce the correct results. Next, let's go to Rothstein's 1970 system and see what happens there. In that system, in the third person singular form, the 0 ending causes the deletion of the preceding yot. However, in the imperative form, a 0 is not used at all in order to differentiate the two forms. Even though it actually is a 0 on the surface, the ending iyot is used in this particular case, which allows us to have two underlying different forms. In other words, czyta is formed on the basis of czytaj plus 0. However, czytaj imperative is formed by czytaj plus iyot, with the deletion of the iyot, which also seems somewhat unjustified. A third treatment was done in 1980 by the Polish linguist Guzman, and Guzman introduced a vowel that does not exist at all in Polish phonetics, a segment called lax vowel E, something on the order of years that are sometimes introduced by linguists. And it doesn't exist anywhere else. It gets deleted exactly like Rothstein's iyot ending, and its only purpose apparently is to serve as a fictitious element to produce a difference between these two forms. So the same criticisms would apply as were made in the case of Rothstein's system. It introduces an element that is only there instead of the 0 to produce a different result. Now, the fourth system is that of Laskovsky of 1984, and in that system, in both forms, the stem czytaj is followed by the 0 ending, which I would say is correct. However, the question would be, how does Laskovsky differentiate them if they're both czytaj followed by 0? Well, in the imperative, the 0 is given a plus vocalic property, and that does not cause the deletion of the yot. However, in the third person present form, the 0 is given a plus consonantal property and a non-vocalic property, and that does cause the deletion of the preceding yot. Essentially, this does not really rely on the elements, the phonological elements or morphophonemic elements to cause the deletions, but it's just essentially another way of saying in the imperative you get one result, and in the third person singular you get another result. This approach is using the semantic grammatical environment of the imperative and indicative present, and that is really how that result is achieved, rather than using strictly structural factors outside of grammar and semantics. Well, the conclusion is that the 0 ending after the I suffix is obvious, but the two forms must be distinguished from each other. Rothstein is incorrect in positing the imperative ending iyot instead of zero, since when both endings are possible, it is the zero that's used, which is usually the method for determining which ending is basic. Table 1 in the accompanying material illustrates what we've been speaking about and gives us a sample of the 4 approaches that have been attempted. I will now outline an alternative solution which starts with a non-traditional segmentation of the Polish conjugational endings as consisting of 3 morphemes: a tense morpheme, a person morpheme, and a number morpheme at the very last. Now, if this is applied to the third person singular form, czyta, all 3 morphemes come out as being 0. The present tense morpheme would be 0, which is, in a sense, the theme vowel. The third person ending is 0, and singular in opposition to plural also is a 0. In other words, a sequence of 3 zeros. In the imperative, we place an inner word boundary after the imperative 0 ending, but before the ending for person and number. In other words, czytaj with a 0, then a word boundary, and then 2 further zeros for person and number. So the basic difference between the third person singular and the imperative in my system is the existence of an extra word boundary after the imperative endings. There's an internal word boundary and also a final word boundary. Now, this has some justification. There is a type of sandhi phenomenon in Polish dialects, such as a special devoicing that we get in the imperative form that explains the extra word boundary. For example, chodźmy can be pronounced phonetically as ch, and that would be the very same as word final devoicing. The only way to really explain the devoicing that we would get in chodźmy would be an extra word boundary after the ch sound, underlying j. Now, the situation has been described in the accompanying materials, Table 2, which compares 3 present tense and imperative endings. And we can see in each case you would have the presence of this extra internal word boundary in the imperative, but not in the indicative 3 forms. For example, we have czyta versus czytaj, we have czytacie versus czytajcie, and we have czytamy versus czytajmy. All these cases are parallel, and each of the imperative instances would have an example of an internal word boundary, an additional word boundary after the imperative 0 ending. Now, there is still another proof that a word boundary runs after the imperative ending. When the imperative ej ending is used, there is a possible consonant voicing opposition in front of it. For example, kpi versus rwi. However, this becomes impossible before the 0 imperative ending, since the pre-0 consonant is effectively at a structural word final boundary. For example, chodźmy, prośmy, where you either get voiced or voiceless depending on the given dialect before the mit element, but what you never can get in the forms chodźmy and prośmy is a voicing opposition before the m. Now, normally you would be able to get that before an m. The only explanation is the fact that you have the equivalent of a word boundary between the stem final consonant and the m in this particular situation. That is to say, where the imperative 0 is used. The situation described leads to the conclusion that all present tense Polish conjugational endings may actually consist of 3 morphemic components, as shown in Table 3 in the accompanying materials, where one can see that in the so-called third conjugation, the conjugation of czyta and czytaj, we have 0 in the first position, that is the present tense, And then in the third person singular, that is to say the third person ending, we have a 0 for person, and we have a 0 for number, giving us 3 zeros in a row, or a triple 0 in that usage. Now, the first position uses a vowel or 0 to represent present tense, in contrast to the consonantal w of the past tense. The 3 conjugation class theme vowels serve as the present tense allomorphs and are high on rounded e, opposed to the third conjugation 0. Person in the second place is represented there, and the first person has the feature of nasality, such as czytam. The second person is marked by a non-nasal consonant, that is czytasz or czytacie, while the third person uses the unmarked 0 ending. The first two positions are parallel in several ways, opposing plus or minus high versus 0, or plus or minus nasal versus 0. In each case, 0 represents the unmarked situation, and in position 1, it is the most productive and prevalent verb class that gets the 0. In the second position, it is the third person that gets the 0, used for parties outside the speech event, including impersonal expressions. The third position uses 0 for singular, which is quite common in languages, opposed to a consistent vowel that's found in the plural. Again, the 0 represents the unmarked number singular. Since the conjugational system of Polish, as depicted, differs from that of Russian, for which the Jakobsonian system of 1948 was devised in the first place, obviously there will be some very different rules of combination and deletion for Polish, which we can summarize. Firstly, when an ending consists of both 0 and non-zero morphemes, the 0 has no effect on deletion, and we can say that such 0 morphemes get deleted themselves. For example, the stem final yot of czytaj is deleted before the 0 m-i due to the m. So that's why we get czytamy. In other words, we skip over the 0 and combine the yot with the m, deleting the yot. When a 0 occurs alone as an ending, it functions as a vowel if it is a single 0, as in the imperative, but as a consonant if it is a multiple 0, as in the third person singular form. Now notice in the imperative, it's very significant that we have this extra word boundary that we talked about, because that allows the 0 to combine as a single 0. In the indicative, we don't have an internal word boundary, so we have a triple 0. And that is essentially the answer to why czyta gets its final yot deleted with the triple 0, but the imperative czytaj, which has only a single 0 followed by an internal word boundary, does not have this deletion. Now, this solution, which appeals to the structural specifics of the imperative, can be linked to the entire system of Polish conjugation, and is proposed as a better answer to the initial question posed above. Why do we have czyta but czytaj? Thank you.